The United Nations Security Council has held a meeting to discuss the human rights situation in Ukraine. The US and Britain came to the defense of the newly installed pro-West government in Kiev, while Russia spoke of atrocities against the people in the eastern parts of the country. Caleb Morpin reports from New York.
Vitaly Churkin, permanent representative of the Russian Federation in the United Nations, took the floor to describe violent repression in eastern Ukraine at the UN Security Council meeting. He highlighted the use of extra-legal armed groups like the Right Sector, which are being mobilized to attack pro-Russia protesters.
Those who, as a result of the forcible coup, usurped power in Kiev, have chosen to ignore the legitimate demands of the inhabitants of the southeast and the unconstitutional use of armed force to pacify their own people, blasphemously referring to it as bandits and terrorists. Such callous steps are fraught with the risk of a real civil war in Ukraine.
U.S. envoy Samantha Power defended the actions of the Ukrainian government and claimed that the protests are being incited by Russia.
Over the last several days, heavily armed pro-Russian separatists have seized the city administration, police stations, and other government buildings in 11 cities in Donetsk Oblast. Every major city in the region has at least one building under occupation. It is clear that these actions were not a set of spontaneous events or homegrown.
The Russian Federation is calling for the violent repression of protesters in eastern Ukraine to end and for the human rights of all people to be protected. David McReynolds, a peace activist from the War Resisters League, says that underlying the crisis is aggression by the U.S. and NATO against Russia.
NATO keeps pushing east toward what had been the Soviet Union. Russia had hoped that when it saw the collapse of Eastern Europe, that the West would let that become more or less neutral. And the West kept pushing NATO farther east.
Reports have surfaced that some Ukrainian soldiers sent to the east have laid down their weapons and joined with the protesters. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon continues to call for dialogue and restraint as tension rises. Caleb Maupin, Press TV, New York.